Cowboy went hunting for Christmas, but what he brought home shocked everyone. He stepped outside his small wooden cabin, the familiar sound of snow crunching under his boots greeting him like an old friend. The sky was painted in soft shades of orange and pink as the sun slowly rose above the horizon. It was Christmas season, but unlike other years, this one felt different to John. There was a restless feeling in his heart, a desire to do something unique, something that would make this Christmas unforgettable. John had been a cowboy all his life. He loved the wide-open fields, the smell of hay in the morning, and the quiet that only the countryside could offer. But over the years, he had realized that true joy wasn't in the land or the work. It was in sharing moments with others. His family was small but close. His mother, who had taught him the value of kindness, always believed that giving was the greatest gift. His younger sister, Lucy, had a mischievous smile and a laugh that could warm the coldest winter day. And then there was his father, a strong, quiet man who had taught John everything he knew about riding horses, tending cattle, and respecting nature. This year, John wanted Christmas to be different. He didn't want store-bought gifts or a simple dinner of prepackaged meals. He wanted something real, something that carried the spirit of the land he loved so much. And so, he had made a plan. He would go hunting not just for himself, but to create a feast for his family. He imagined their faces lighting up with surprise and joy when they saw what he would bring back. He had done this before, of course, but this year he felt something more profound stirring inside him, a sense that the ordinary wasn't enough. He went inside his cabin briefly to gather his gear. His rifle, worn from years of careful use, leaned against the corner. His hat, wide-brimmed and slightly faded from the sun, sat on a hook by the door. He packed a small bag with essentials, some food, water, and a blanket, just in case the hunt took longer than expected. As he zipped the bag closed, he felt a flutter of anticipation mixed with a hint of nervousness. Hunting was never just about the chase. It was about patience, observation, and respect for the creatures of the wild. He had learned that over many winters, tracking deer through snow-laden forests, waiting silently for hours for the perfect moment. Outside again, the cold wind brushed past him, and he took a deep breath, savoring the smell of pine and frost. His horse, Daisy, waited patiently, stamping her hooves in the snow. John patted her neck affectionately, whispering, "Ready for a little adventure, girl," she whinnied softly, as if answering him, and he smiled. Mounting Daisy, he felt a familiar sense of freedom. The world seemed vast and full of possibilities. Every tree, every snow-covered branch, every distant hill seemed to be calling out to him, promising something unknown yet wonderful. As he rode through the countryside, John's mind wandered. He thought about past Christmases, the laughter of his family around the fireplace, the smell of roasted turkey, the sparkling lights on the small tree in their living room. He remembered a Christmas when Lucy had made a paper star for the top of the tree, and how proud she had been when John had helped her place it. These memories filled him with warmth, but also with a quiet determination. This year, he wanted to create a memory that would be talked about for years, something that was uniquely his contribution to the joy of the season. The journey to the hunting grounds was not short. The snow made the ride slow, and the path twisted through dense woods and over frozen streams. Yet, John felt no impatience. He enjoyed every moment, the sound of Daisy's hooves crunching in the snow, the way the frost clung to the branches, the occasional bird breaking the silence with its song. It was a world that felt untouched, peaceful, and alive. He observed every detail carefully, knowing that nature had its rhythm and secrets. The deer, the rabbits, the foxes, they all moved in patterns that could be understood if one paid attention, and John loved understanding. Hours passed as he rode deeper into the forest. The sun climbed higher, glinting off the snow like tiny diamonds. John stopped occasionally to check tracks on the ground, trying to find signs of animals nearby. He noticed the subtle disturbances in the snow, the broken twigs, the faint footprints of deer or rabbits. Each clue was a puzzle, and he enjoyed solving it. It reminded him of why he loved the outdoors so much, not just for the thrill of hunting, but for the connection to life that it provided. Out here, he felt alive in a way that the cabin, cozy though it was, could never give him. By midday, he found a clearing surrounded by tall pine trees. The sunlight streamed through in golden beams, making the snow glisten like a blanket of stars. John dismounted Daisy and led her carefully through the clearing, scanning the area for any movement. He crouched low, feeling the crunch of snow under his boots, listening to the subtle sounds of the forest, the rustling of leaves, the distant call of a bird, the faint whisper of the wind. Hunting required patience, and John had plenty. He knew that rushing would lead to failure, but a calm, observant mind could lead to success. As he waited, memories of his childhood came back. He remembered accompanying his father on hunting trips, learning the patience and respect required to track an animal. He remembered the quiet lessons his father gave him about life, about valuing every living creature, and about taking only what was needed. Those lessons were more than just about hunting. They were about understanding the world, about empathy, about being responsible. John felt a deep gratitude for his upbringing, knowing that it had shaped him into the man he was today. The afternoon stretched on. The sun began to dip toward the horizon, casting long shadows across the snow. John had seen little movement so far, but he remained hopeful. He knew that the forest had its own timing, and that sometimes the most important discoveries were not what you expected. He thought about the smiles of his family again, imagining their laughter as they gathered around the table. That image kept him patient and focused, even as the cold grew sharper and the wind began to bite through his coat. As the sky turned shades of pink and purple, John realized that his hunt was not going to be simple this year. But deep down, he felt a stirring of anticipation, a sense that this day would bring something unexpected. The forest seemed to hold its breath, and he felt a strange mix of excitement and calm. He was ready for whatever this day had to offer, knowing that Christmas was not just about the feast, but about love, surprise, and the stories that would live on in memory. With a final glance at the clearing and a gentle pat on Daisy's neck, John prepared to move further into the forest. He was determined, yet open to the mysteries that lay ahead. He felt the thrill of possibility in his chest, knowing that this Christmas could be unlike any other. And so, with hope in his heart and a steady hand on the reins, John set off, unaware that what he would find that day would change not just his Christmas, but the hearts of everyone he loved. The forest grew thicker as John rode deeper, and the sunlight filtered through the tall pine trees in soft golden streaks. Each breath he took seemed colder than the last, yet somehow cleaner, sharper, more alive. Daisy, his loyal horse, moved steadily, her hooves crunching over the snow, ears twitching at every faint sound. John felt a familiar thrill as he watched the forest around him. Each tree, each shadow, seemed alive with possibility. He knew that hunting was never just about the act itself. It was about understanding the world, reading its signs, and moving carefully with patience and respect. The first few hours of the hunt had passed quietly. John had spotted small animals, squirrels darting from tree to tree, rabbits hopping swiftly across clearings, but nothing substantial yet. He hadn't seen a deer, not a single one. At first, he felt a twinge of frustration, a natural feeling for any hunter who had spent hours in the cold with little to show. But then he reminded himself why he was here. This hunt was not just about the catch. It was about the experience, about spending time in nature, about making Christmas special in his own way. He dismounted Daisy at the edge of a frozen stream and tied her to a nearby tree. The horse nickered softly, shaking the snow from her mane, and John reached into his bag for some water. As he sipped, he looked around the forest, noticing the subtle signs that others might miss. The way the snow was broken in one area suggested that a small animal had passed through recently. The scratch marks on a nearby tree hinted that a deer had rubbed its antlers there. John smiled quietly to himself, enjoying the feeling of being part of this rhythm, part of a world that moved with quiet, hidden life. He began to follow the tracks he had found, moving carefully so as not to disturb the area. Every step was deliberate, each movement mindful. Hunting, he knew, was as much about patience as it was about skill. Hours could pass without any sight of the intended prey, and yet every moment held its own reward. The crisp, cold air, the sound of wind through the trees, the quiet that allowed a person to think deeply and reflect. John thought about his family back home, imagining Lucy's excited voice, his mother's gentle smile, and his father's approving nod. That thought gave him warmth even as the cold seeped into his bones. As he moved further, he noticed small footprints in the snow. Perhaps a young deer had passed this way recently. He crouched low, observing the direction of the tracks, the spacing between the steps, the slight disturbances in the snow. The forest seemed to encourage him to take his time, to slow down and pay attention. And so he did, savoring the stillness. The sun was now high in the sky, casting a warm glow over the frozen landscape, and John felt a strange mix of calm and excitement. He was alone, yet not lonely, surrounded by nature, yet completely focused on the task at hand. Hours passed as John continued to track the footprints. Occasionally, he would stop and scan the area, looking for movement. The forest was alive with sounds, the rustling of leaves, the distant call of a bird, the crackling of ice beneath snow. Every small sound seemed amplified in the quiet, reminding him that life continued here in ways humans often overlooked. He felt a deep connection to this place, a sense that he was walking not just through the forest, but through something larger, something timeless. The thrill of hunting was still there, but it was accompanied by a profound respect for life, and the understanding that not every hunt ended the way one expected. As midday approached, John realized he had covered more ground than he had planned. The sun had climbed high and shadows began to shorten. He paused to rest, sitting on a fallen log and taking in the view. The forest stretched endlessly in every direction, each tree coated in sparkling snow. He could see distant hills and valleys, the frozen streams winding like silver ribbons. It was beautiful, breathtaking even, and he felt grateful for the opportunity to witness it. In moments like this, he understood why he loved hunting, not for the capture, but for the connection, the closeness to the natural world, the clarity it brought to his thoughts. While resting, he thought about the meal he intended to provide. He imagined the table at home, covered in food, laughter, and warmth. But he also considered the possibility that the hunt might not go as planned. Nature had a way of surprising anyone who ventured into it, and sometimes those surprises were the most important lessons of all. John's father had often told him that the forest could teach patience, humility, and understanding, qualities more valuable than any trophy or feast. John smiled at the memory, realizing that his father's wisdom applied not only to hunting, but to life itself. After a short break, John stood and continued his search. The tracks had become more distinct now, leading him toward a small clearing surrounded by towering pines. He approached quietly, every sense alert, ready to react at the slightest movement. He had learned over the years that rushing could ruin everything. Patience, observation, and calmness were far more important than speed or force. The snow crunched softly beneath his boots, a sound that seemed louder in the serene silence of the forest. He held his rifle loosely but ready, knowing that the moment of truth could come at any second. As he reached the edge of the clearing, John froze. He had spotted movement, a small, dark shape moving through the snow. His heart raced with anticipation. For a brief moment, he thought he had finally found a deer, the perfect opportunity to fulfill his plan for a Christmas feast. He adjusted his stance, quietly lifting his rifle, eyes focused on the figure. Every muscle in his body was tense with concentration. The forest seemed to hold its breath with him, but as he moved closer, his excitement quickly turned to surprise. The shape was not a deer. It was a small dog, shivering in the cold, its fur matted and covered with snow. The dog's eyes, wide and fearful, met his, and John felt an unexpected pang in his heart. It was clear the animal had been alone for some time, struggling to survive in the harsh winter. He lowered his rifle immediately, feeling a mix of relief and compassion. The dog was weak, cold, and frightened, but it was alive. And at that moment, John knew that helping this creature was far more important than any meal he could have hunted. Crouching down, John spoke softly to the dog, using a gentle voice that carried no threat. "Hey there, little one, you're safe now." The dog hesitated at first, unsure whether to trust him, but eventually it took a small step forward. John carefully extended his hands, offering warmth and reassurance. He slowly wrapped the dog in the blanket he had packed, feeling the small body trembling against him. Despite the cold and the fatigue, a smile spread across his face. In that moment, he realized that the forest had given him a different kind of gift, one he had not anticipated, but one far more meaningful than any deer or feast. The dog, sensing safety, relaxed slightly in John's arms. He examined it closely and saw the signs of hunger and exhaustion, but also the resilience in its eyes. Somehow, against the odds, it had survived in the harsh winter. John knew that the creature needed immediate care and warmth. He gently stroked its fur and whispered reassuring words, feeling a bond forming between them. The forest around him remained silent, as if acknowledging this small act of kindness. In that quiet moment, John felt a sense of purpose, a feeling that he was doing exactly what he was meant to do. After ensuring the dog was secure, John lifted it carefully and returned to Daisy. The horse nuzzled the blanket, as if sensing the presence of the new companion. John mounted Daisy, holding the dog close, and began the ride back toward home. The forest that had been filled with anticipation and tension now felt calm and serene. He thought about how he would explain this to his family, imagining their surprise and joy. He realized that this unexpected turn was far more significant than the original plan for a Christmas feast. He had come into the forest hoping to provide food and celebration, but he was leaving with a life to care for, and a story that would touch everyone he loved. As the sun began to dip toward the horizon, casting long shadows over the snow-covered ground, John felt a deep sense of fulfillment. The day had not gone as he had planned, but it had gone exactly as it should. The quiet of the forest, the warmth of the small dog in his arms, and the anticipation of sharing this discovery with his family made every step worthwhile. He knew that the memory of this hunt, unlike any other, would stay with him for years to come. And he also knew that this Christmas, the gift he would bring home would be remembered not for what he had caught, but for the love and care he had shown. With steady hands, a gentle heart, and a sense of wonder, John guided Daisy through the snow, heading homeward. The journey back seemed shorter somehow, the cold less biting, the forest less daunting. Every step carried the promise of reunion, warmth, and the beginning of a new story, one that would forever change the meaning of Christmas for him and his family. And as the sun disappeared behind the distant hills, painting the sky in shades of gold and pink, John felt the quiet certainty that this day was one of the most important of his life. A day that had begun like any other, but would end with a gift far greater than he had ever imagined. John rode slowly through the forest, the little dog snugly wrapped in his blanket. Its small body shivered occasionally, but each time he held it closer, its tremors lessened. He could feel the rapid beat of its tiny heart against his chest, and he whispered softly, trying to calm the frightened animal. "It's okay, you're safe now. I won't let anything happen to you." The dog's ears flicked at the sound of his voice, and for a moment its fearful eyes seemed to soften. John's heart swelled with a mixture of relief and joy. This tiny creature, lost and alone, had somehow found its way to him. The ride home was quiet, but not in a lonely way. The forest seemed to embrace them both, the snow-covered trees forming a protective canopy above. Occasionally, a bird would call, breaking the silence, or a distant rustle would hint at life moving elsewhere. Daisy moved steadily, her hooves sinking into the fresh snow, leaving tracks that traced their journey. John thought about how fragile life could be, how this little dog had survived alone in such harsh conditions. It made him reflect on his own life, on the small challenges and struggles that each of them faced every day, and how sometimes survival itself was a victory. As they moved, John kept an eye out for signs of other animals. Hunting had taught him to observe everything carefully, the smallest disturbances in the snow, the faintest tracks, the subtle changes in the environment. But now, instead of focusing on deer or rabbits, he noticed every detail about the little dog he carried. Its fur, once matted and dirty, now brushed against his coat, slightly warmer from the blanket. Its eyes, wide and alert, followed every movement, and John could see the spark of trust beginning to form. He realized that this bond, this connection, was stronger than anything he had expected to find that day. The journey back was longer than he anticipated. The forest seemed endless, stretching out in every direction with snow-covered hills and valleys. John's thoughts wandered to his family, imagining the surprise on their faces when they saw what he had brought home. He pictured Lucy's laughter, her small hands reaching out to pet the dog. He imagined his mother carefully preparing a warm meal, perhaps even creating a cozy little bed for the new arrival. And his father, strong, steady, and often silent, would likely nod in quiet approval, appreciating the kindness and responsibility that John had shown. These thoughts gave him warmth and motivation to continue, despite the growing fatigue in his legs and the chill in the air. Hours seemed to pass as he rode through winding paths, and John noticed the sun beginning to dip behind the trees. Shadows stretched across the snow, painting long, dark lines that moved with the uneven terrain. The forest had changed from the bright, sparkling landscape of midday to something softer, more mysterious. Yet he felt no fear. The dog nestled comfortably in his arms. Daisy moved with steady determination, and he had a sense of purpose that made the cold less biting. The forest had become a place of reflection, a corridor where he could consider life, kindness, and the unexpected turns that brought meaning to ordinary days. As twilight approached, John reached a small hill that overlooked a wide valley. He paused, taking a moment to rest and observe the scene. The sun's fading light reflected off the snow, making the entire valley glow as if covered in millions of tiny crystals. The view took his breath away, a reminder of the beauty of the world he lived in. It was easy to forget such things in the hustle and bustle of everyday life, but the forest had a way of showing him what truly mattered. He shifted slightly to make the dog more comfortable, and it pressed its tiny nose against his chest, a small gesture of trust and gratitude. While resting, John thought about the lessons life often delivered in unexpected ways. He had set out with a clear goal, to hunt a deer for a Christmas feast. He had expected a simple journey, perhaps a short adventure followed by the satisfaction of providing for his family. Yet the forest had offered him something entirely different, a chance to save and care for a small, vulnerable creature. He realized that life sometimes offered gifts in forms he could not anticipate, and that the true meaning of giving often lay not in what one planned, but in what one did when faced with unexpected opportunities. The dog stirred slightly in his arms, and John leaned down to whisper to it, "Don't worry, little one. You're coming home with me. You'll be warm, safe, and loved." The words seemed to have an effect. The dog's eyes softened further, and it rested its head against his chest, closing its eyes briefly. John felt a surge of emotion he had not expected to experience that day. It was a mixture of tenderness, responsibility, and deep satisfaction. He had entered the forest seeking to provide for his family, but now he understood that the joy of giving could come in forms far more profound than any meal or material gift. As the sky darkened and the first stars began to twinkle, John continued the journey. He navigated carefully through narrow paths and over icy streams, guiding Daisy and keeping the dog secure. He occasionally spoke to the dog, his voice soft and comforting, sharing stories of the forest, of the snow, and even of past Christmases. It was as if he wanted the dog to understand that it was safe, that it was no longer alone, and that it had found someone who cared. The dog seemed to respond in its own small way, shifting closer to him, its small body relaxing with each word and gentle motion. Night fell slowly, and the forest transformed once more. Shadows grew longer, and the cold became sharper. Yet the feeling of warmth inside John's chest did not fade. The little dog's presence had changed something fundamental in him, an awareness of the importance of compassion, of taking responsibility for another living being, and of the joy that could come from the simplest acts of care. He realized that the forest, in its quiet, mysterious way, had given him a lesson far more valuable than the one he had initially set out to learn. Finally, after what seemed like hours of careful riding, John recognized familiar landmarks: the bend in the frozen creek, the group of tall pines near the edge of the forest, the distant smoke rising from his cabin's chimney. Relief washed over him. He had made it through the forest safely, bringing with him not the feast he had originally intended, but a living, breathing companion who needed his care. Daisy's steady pace and the dog's calm presence reassured him that this day, while unexpected, had been a success in a way that mattered far more than he had imagined. As he approached the outskirts of the town, a few early evening lights flickered on in the windows of nearby homes. The small town seemed peaceful, quiet, and welcoming, a stark contrast to the vast, wild forest he had just left behind. John thought about how his family would react to his return. He could already imagine the mix of surprise, concern, and delight that would greet him. The dog stirred in his arms again, and he whispered reassuringly, "Almost there. You'll see everyone soon. You're going to have a home for Christmas." The dog's small movements and trusting gaze reminded him that this moment, the moment of rescue, of giving safety and warmth, was already a gift in itself. By the time he reached the path leading to his cabin, the sky had turned a deep shade of blue, dotted with stars. The snow glowed faintly in the moonlight, creating a serene, almost magical scene. John guided Daisy carefully along the path, mindful of every step. The little dog, now relaxed, peeked out from the blanket occasionally, as if curious about the approaching home. John felt a swell of emotion he had not anticipated when he had set out that morning. The day had begun like any other hunt, but it had transformed into a story of hope, compassion, and the unexpected beauty of life. Finally, the cabin came into view, smoke curling from the chimney, a warm glow spilling from the windows. John's heart lifted as he prepared to step into the warmth of his home, knowing that he carried something precious in his arms. Not a deer, not a Christmas feast, but a living being who would become a part of his family. He felt a quiet pride, a sense of fulfillment, and an understanding that this Christmas, the gift he brought home would be remembered far longer than any meal or object could ever be. John dismounted Daisy carefully, holding the dog close, and approached the door. The familiar scent of pine, firewood, and home filled his senses. As he reached for the handle, he felt a final, deep connection to the forest behind him, a place that had given him both a challenge and a reward beyond measure. The little dog shifted slightly in his arms, its warmth and trust grounding him, reminding him that the true spirit of Christmas was not in plans or expectations, but in acts of kindness, love, and compassion. With a deep breath, John opened the door, stepping into the welcoming light of home, carrying a story and a gift that no one could have anticipated, but that everyone would cherish forever. John stepped through the doorway of his cabin, the warm glow of the fireplace greeting him. Like an old friend. The cozy scent of pinewood smoke, mixed with the faint aroma of baked bread, wrapped around him. He could hear the soft chatter of his family in the other room, and for a moment he hesitated. How would he explain the day's unexpected turn? He had not brought home a deer for Christmas dinner, as he had originally planned. Instead, he held in his arms a small, shivering dog he had found alone in the forest. Lucy, his younger sister, was the first to notice him. Her head popped up over the back of the couch, eyes wide with curiosity. "John, you're back. Did you find anything?" she asked, her voice bright with excitement. John smiled softly but didn't answer immediately. He wanted to create a moment of surprise, something that would be remembered for years. "I did find something," he said finally, his voice calm but filled with a hint of excitement. "But it's not what you think." His mother, who had been knitting by the fireplace, set her work aside and looked up, eyebrows raised. "Not a deer?" she asked, her tone gentle but questioning. John shook his head. "No," he said, "something else. Something unexpected." He carefully unwrapped the blanket, revealing the tiny dog nestled inside. The dog's fur was damp and matted from the snow, and it shivered slightly, but it looked up at John with wide, trusting eyes. The warmth of the cabin seemed to soothe it immediately, and it lifted its small head to sniff the air, taking in its new surroundings. Lucy gasped and jumped up, rushing toward John. "Oh, he's so tiny. Is he hurt?" she asked, reaching out slowly to pet the little dog. John shook his head. "No, he's okay, just cold and hungry," he said, gently guiding Lucy's hand so she wouldn't frighten it. "I found him in the forest. He's been alone for a while." His mother rose from her chair, approaching them with a look of curiosity mixed with concern. She bent slightly, smiling at the little dog. "Well," she said softly, "he certainly seems to have found the right place to spend Christmas." John's father, a tall, quiet man with broad shoulders and a gentle face, stood in the doorway observing the scene. He said nothing at first, but his eyes held a mixture of surprise and approval. He had taught John about responsibility and care, and it was clear to him that his son had made a choice that reflected those lessons. "Looks like you brought home more than just yourself," he said finally, a small smile tugging at the corners of his mouth. John nodded, feeling a warmth spread through him. He realized that the day's adventure, though different from what he had planned, had already become meaningful. The little dog, now warmed by the blanket and the room's heat, began to move slightly, exploring its new surroundings with cautious curiosity. It sniffed at the fireplace, the furniture, and finally Lucy's outstretched hands. Lucy laughed softly as the dog licked her fingers, its tiny tail wagging. "He's perfect," she said. "Can we keep him, John, please?" John chuckled quietly. "I think he's already found his place," he said. The dog barked softly, as if in agreement, and John felt a laugh escape him. The house, usually quiet with the subtle sounds of family life, was suddenly filled with a lively energy. John's mother quickly went to the kitchen to prepare a warm meal for the little dog. She filled a small bowl with warm water and softened some leftover bread, careful to make it gentle for the tiny animal's stomach. Lucy stayed close to the dog, whispering reassuring words and stroking its fur. John watched, feeling a sense of pride and contentment that no Christmas feast could have given him. The dog's small whimpers of hunger turned into eager bites of food, and soon it had calmed enough to sit beside Lucy, looking content and safe for the first time in its life. The evening passed in a blur of laughter, storytelling, and gentle care. John's father finally joined them by the fire, sitting quietly as he observed the little dog exploring its new surroundings. He said nothing at first, but the faint smile on his face revealed everything. John's mother brought over blankets for the dog, creating a small nest by the fireplace. Lucy arranged the space carefully, making sure the little one would be comfortable. The dog curled up in its new bed, eyes half closed, finally feeling warmth and security. John watched the scene unfold, feeling an emotion so strong that it brought a few tears to his eyes. As the night deepened, John reflected on the day's events. He had set out that morning with a simple goal: to provide a Christmas feast for his family. He had imagined the joy on their faces when he returned with a deer, the satisfaction of fulfilling his plan. Yet, life had surprised him in a way he had never expected. The small dog he had found alone in the forest had changed everything. It had brought the family together in a different way, creating memories that would last far longer than any meal. John realized that sometimes the most meaningful gifts were those that came unexpectedly, unplanned, and from the heart. Lucy, unable to contain her excitement, began telling stories to the little dog as if it could understand every word. "This is Christmas," she said, her voice full of wonder. "You're safe now, and we're going to take care of you. You'll never be alone again." The dog responded with a small bark, and Lucy clapped her hands joyfully. John's mother smiled, watching the interaction, and whispered, "You've given us all a gift tonight, John. Not the one you thought, but one far greater." John nodded silently, feeling the truth in her words. He had set out to hunt, but he had found a living reminder of kindness, compassion, and the unexpected beauty of giving. The fire crackled softly, casting flickering shadows across the room. The little dog had settled into its new bed, Lucy curled up beside it, and John's parents sat with quiet smiles, observing the scene. The warmth of the cabin contrasted sharply with the cold world outside, but inside, the family felt a deeper warmth, the warmth of love, of shared experience, and of the joy that comes from helping another living being. John realized that the forest had given him more than he could have imagined. It had given him a chance to experience true meaning, a lesson in humility, and a reminder that compassion often outweighed ambition. As the night continued, John thought about the day's events in a deeper way. The forest had been challenging, the cold harsh, and the hunt uncertain. But it had also provided him with an opportunity to act selflessly, to care for something smaller and weaker than himself. That act of kindness, small as it seemed in the grand scheme of the world, had created ripples of joy and warmth that reached everyone in his family. He understood in that moment that sometimes the best outcomes were those that could not be planned, those that required an open heart and a willingness to embrace the unexpected. By the time bedtime approached, the cabin was filled with a gentle quiet. The little dog slept peacefully in its makeshift bed, Lucy finally dozing off nearby. John's parents sat together by the fire, their hands clasped, sharing a silent moment of reflection. John himself felt a profound sense of satisfaction. He had entered the forest seeking a Christmas meal, but he had returned with something far more meaningful: a life to care for, a lesson in empathy, and memories that would last a lifetime. He knew that this Christmas would be remembered not for the feast, but for the unexpected gift of love and compassion. John sat quietly for a moment, reflecting on the journey. The day had been long, filled with cold, effort, and anticipation, but it had also been filled with wonder, surprise, and deep emotional reward. The small dog, once alone and shivering in the snow, had found a place where it was loved and safe. The family had found joy in an unexpected form, and John had learned that giving was not always about what one planned, but about responding with care when life presented opportunities. Finally, as he blew out the candle by the bedside and prepared to rest, John felt a quiet contentment. The cabin was warm, the fire crackling softly, and the dog was asleep, breathing evenly. The snow outside reflected the moonlight, painting the world in a serene silver glow. John understood that this Christmas was unlike any other, and that it would be remembered not for material gifts, but for the act of kindness that had transformed an ordinary day into something extraordinary. In that stillness, he felt the quiet joy of a cowboy who had gone into the forest seeking one thing, and had found something far more precious, a reminder that love, compassion, and the willingness to care could create the most lasting memories of all. The morning of Christmas arrived like a quiet blessing. Snow had fallen overnight, covering the world in a soft, sparkling blanket. The cabin looked like something out of a storybook, with frost clinging to the edges of the windows and smoke curling gently from the chimney. Inside, the little dog stirred in its warm bed, yawning and stretching as if it understood that today was special. John woke before anyone else, sitting quietly by the fire for a few moments, reflecting on the events of the previous day. The forest, the cold, the unexpected rescue, it all felt like part of a story that was still unfolding. He glanced at the dog, now alert and curious, sniffing the edges of the blanket. John smiled and whispered softly, "Ready for Christmas." The dog tilted its head as if it understood, and John chuckled. He rose, stretching and preparing to greet his family. The cabin was warm and inviting, filled with the faint scent of pine, baked bread, and the lingering aroma of last night's fire. He could hear faint movements in the other room. Lucy was up, no doubt curious about the snow and eager to see the surprise he had brought home. John walked quietly into the main room, careful not to startle anyone. Lucy, as expected, was the first to spot him. Her eyes widened and a smile spread across her face as she noticed the little dog. "John, is that?" she began, rushing forward, her excitement palpable. John nodded, setting the dog down gently. The little creature sniffed the floor cautiously, then looked up at Lucy with what seemed like a small, happy bark. Lucy laughed, picking it up carefully and cradling it in her arms. "He's perfect." "What should we call him?" she asked, turning to John, her eyes sparkling. John's mother entered the room then, drawn by the sound of voices. She stopped in her tracks, taking in the sight of the dog nestled in Lucy's arms. "Oh, John," she said softly, kneeling to examine the little animal. Her hands brushed its fur gently, and the dog responded by nuzzling into her palms. "He's found his home," she whispered, smiling. John's father followed behind, placing a hand on John's shoulder, giving him a look of quiet approval. "Looks like you found more than we expected," he said, his deep voice filled with warmth. John nodded, feeling a sense of pride and contentment wash over him. The family gathered near the fireplace, each taking turns observing and gently petting the little dog. Lucy held it close, speaking softly, telling it stories about past Christmases and all the fun they would have together. The dog, once frightened and alone, began to relax in their care, wagging its tail and exploring the room in small, careful steps. John watched, feeling a profound sense of joy. The happiness in his family's faces, the warmth of their love, and the trust of this small creature created a moment that he knew would stay with him forever. Breakfast was prepared with extra care that morning. Though there was no large feast as John had originally planned, the family shared a simple, heartfelt meal together. Plates of eggs, bread, and warm tea filled the table, and amidst it all, the little dog sat contentedly near Lucy, occasionally sniffing at crumbs and wagging its tiny tail. Conversation flowed easily, filled with laughter, playful teasing, and gentle storytelling. John realized that this was the kind of Christmas he had wanted, not extravagant or planned, but simple, real, and full of love. The forest, the cold, and the unexpected rescue had all combined to create a memory far richer than any prepared feast could have provided. After breakfast, the family decided to take the little dog outside to experience its first taste of snow. Lucy wrapped it in a small scarf her mother had knitted, and together they walked out into the sparkling winter landscape. The dog hesitated at first, stepping cautiously onto the snow, but soon it began to romp and explore, its tiny paws leaving delicate prints in the fresh snow. Laughter filled the air as Lucy and John watched, and even their parents smiled at the sheer joy emanating from the little creature. John felt a deep sense of fulfillment. This small, frightened animal had brought so much happiness, not only to him but to his entire family. As the day progressed, the cabin became a hub of warmth, joy, and shared excitement. Neighbors, curious about the cowboy who had gone hunting for Christmas, stopped by to offer greetings and see what he had brought home. They were surprised, delighted, and touched when they saw the little dog nestled in the arms of John's sister. Stories of the rescue spread quickly, and soon the family found themselves sharing not a tale of a hunted deer, but of an unexpected act of kindness. Everyone who visited commented on the joy and love that seemed to radiate from the cabin that day. John spent the afternoon sitting near the fireplace, watching his family interact with the dog. The little creature had fully relaxed, rolling onto its back to receive gentle belly rubs and curling up in laps whenever someone sat near. John felt a quiet satisfaction, a sense that the day had unfolded exactly as it was meant to. He had gone out with one goal in mind, to provide a Christmas feast, but life had given him something far more meaningful. The lesson was clear. Sometimes the gifts that matter most are those that cannot be planned, the ones that arrive unexpectedly and touch hearts in ways no material object ever could. As evening approached, the family gathered again, this time for a small Christmas celebration with a few modest decorations and a simple tree. Lights twinkled gently, casting a warm glow across the room. John placed the little dog near the tree, and Lucy decorated it carefully, hanging tiny ornaments within reach. The dog sniffed curiously at the ornaments, occasionally nudging them with its nose, and the family laughed at its playful curiosity. It was a scene of warmth, joy, and togetherness, the kind of Christmas that John had always dreamed of, though he had never imagined it would come in this form. After the celebration, John sat quietly by the fire, reflecting on the day. He thought about the forest, the cold, and the long hours he had spent hunting, tracking, and finally discovering the little dog. That moment of rescue, so simple yet so profound, had transformed an ordinary Christmas into something extraordinary. He realized that the greatest gifts were not those planned or expected, but those given from the heart, born of compassion, care, and a willingness to embrace the unexpected. He felt gratitude for the lessons learned, the joy shared, and the new life that had become part of their family. The little dog, now fully comfortable, curled up in Lucy's lap as she read a story aloud. Its breathing was slow and even, a sign of trust and security. John's parents watched quietly, their expressions soft with approval and warmth. John knew that this Christmas, their family had experienced something rare and precious, a reminder of the importance of kindness, empathy, and the simple joys of life. The forest had tested him, the cold had challenged him, and life had rewarded him in the most unexpected way. The day's events had become a story not just about hunting or survival, but about love, trust, and the true spirit of giving. As night fell and the snow continued to blanket the world outside, John felt a profound sense of peace. The cabin, warm and filled with laughter and love, was a sanctuary against the cold and darkness beyond. The little dog, now a permanent member of their family, slept soundly, its small body radiating trust and comfort. John realized that this Christmas would be remembered not for the food on the table, nor for any gift wrapped in paper, but for the life saved and the bond formed. It was a Christmas that would be told and retold for years, a story of unexpected joy and the power of compassion. Finally, as the household quieted and everyone settled down for the night, John stepped outside for a moment, gazing at the snow-covered landscape. The stars twinkled above, clear and bright against the deep blue of the winter sky. He took a deep breath of the crisp air, feeling the warmth of the fire, the laughter of his family, and the quiet breathing of the little dog inside. In that moment, he understood that the true meaning of Christmas was not in the presents, the decorations, or even the feast. It was in the love shared, the care given, and the unexpected gifts that life brings. John returned inside, feeling a sense of completion and joy. He watched as his family slept, the little dog nestled between Lucy and her mother, safe and warm. He reflected on the forest, the journey, and the moments of decision that had led to this outcome. Life had a way of surprising those who dared to step outside the familiar, to act with kindness, and to embrace the unexpected. This Christmas had been a perfect example. He knew that this story, the day a cowboy went hunting for Christmas and brought home a little dog, would be remembered for generations, not because of a hunt, but because of love. As he finally laid down to sleep, John felt the quiet joy of accomplishment, not in the way he had planned, but in the way life had unfolded. The little dog, now part of the family, slept soundly, a living symbol of hope, compassion, and the true spirit of giving. The forest, the cold, and the journey had all led to this moment, a Christmas filled with warmth, love, and unexpected joy. And as John drifted off to sleep, he knew that this would be a Christmas story he would carry in his heart forever, a story that reminded him and everyone who heard it that the greatest gifts often come when we least expect them.